Nestled in the heart of a quiet street in Indiana, where the community is so tight-knit that everyone seems to know each other, I found myself back home for winter break from college. The neighborhood, a delightful mix of houses, sidewalks, and cozy corners, is the kind you stroll through in a familiar town, its simplicity enriched by a strong sense of unity. I spent my last night packing my bags and spending the last hours with my dad. We shared a beer together, watching a football game that added to the comfort of the moment. After bidding him good night, I retired to bed, eager to make the most of the remaining moments of my holiday. Having bid my dad good night, I retired to bed, eager to savor the remaining moments of my holiday. Morning arrived swiftly. Following my usual routine of a brisk shower, a diligent toothbrushing session, and a bowl of Captain Crunch for breakfast, I expected the familiar buzz of activity from my parents. Normally, my dad would have a coffee in hand, glued to the TV, monitoring the stock market's fortunes. Meanwhile, my mom would be crafting her weekly grocery list, engaging in the usual banter with my dad about meal preferences for the upcoming week. However, as I stepped into the living room, the customary scenes were absent. No clinking coffee cup, no hum of the television, and no sound of my mom's organized planning. A peculiar unease settled in. I peered out at the driveway, confirming my suspicion. Their cars were still there, encased in a layer of ice, as if frozen in time. Having scoured the entire house, I found it eerily empty. Puzzled and slightly unnerved, I decided to call my parents. To my surprise, a distant ringing emanated from their bedroom. Peering inside, I discovered both their phones resting on the chargers. The situation was becoming increasingly bizarre. Who goes somewhere without their phones? Reluctant to involve the police and potentially escalate the situation to a missing persons case, I decided to check on the neighbors next door. This middle-aged couple, educators at the local high school, shared a similar age range with my parents. Their family included 2 children, a son and a young daughter. Knocking on the front door yielded no response, so I tried the side door, their usual entry point. Still, no sign of anyone, no signs of life. Only their cat, a fully grown orange and white male named Samson, lingered outside. Hungry and brushing up against my legs, Samson's presence added to the growing sense of disquiet, making the eerie silence even more profound. "Hello? Is anyone home?" I called out. No response, just the distant chirping of birds. I made my way back to my house, settling in the living room, and parted the curtain, desperately hoping for any sign of life from my neighbors. Maybe a passing car, someone heading to the shops, or even someone defrosting their car. But the scene outside remained eerily quiet. Frustrated and puzzled, I attempted to call a friend on the other side of town, only to be met with continuous ringing and eventually redirected to voicemail. The nagging question persisted: where on earth was everybody? Without a car of my own, I found myself in need of my parents to transport me back to college, leaving me feeling somewhat stranded. As my stomach emitted a distinct growl, I realized the refrigerator offered no food. I threw on my winter coat and set out to investigate if Walmart was open. Maybe, just maybe, my parents would be back by the time I returned. As I stepped outside, the chill in the air sent a shiver down my spine, and the quiet streets amplified the strange atmosphere that had taken hold of the town. The absence of cars and the stillness of the surroundings made my journey to Walmart even more surreal. Arriving at the store, I was met with an unsettling sight. The empty parking lot and the closed doors hinted at an unusual situation. I tried to peer inside through the glass, but the interior remained shrouded in darkness. As I turned around, my gaze met the piercing stare of an elderly woman across the street. The cane she clutched hinted at her age. "Hello, ma'am. Any idea where everyone is?" I inquired. The old woman remained silent. "Ma'am?" I tried again. "It's quite unnerving that everyone's gone," I awkwardly shared, forcing a nervous chuckle. Suddenly, the old woman raised her arm, pointing at me with an open mouth revealing an absence of teeth. A dry, scratchy scream emanated, as though she hadn't sipped water all day. Panic seized me, prompting a hurried retreat towards home. "Apologies, ma'am. I'll leave you be," I stammered, haunted by the old woman's echoing screams. Back home, my parents were still missing, and an eerie silence enveloped the house, punctuated only by the hum of the radiator. That old woman's unfamiliar face haunts me, and I'm at a loss for an explanation. Why does she linger when everyone else seems to have vanished? That night, as I slept, I was abruptly awakened by the shattering of glass. Leaping out of bed, I scrambled to find out the source of the disturbance. Hastily, I threw on a sweatshirt and joggers, and cautiously opened my bedroom door. Descending the stairs, an eerie quiet hung in the air, devoid of any discernible noise. Investigating the origin of the crash, I discovered broken glass scattered on the dining room floor, accompanied by a shattered window, allowing the chilly night air to permeate. From behind me, a faint cackling emerged, reminiscent of an old woman's laughter. Turning around, I came face to face with the same elderly woman from earlier, now clad in a nightgown. Goosebumps prickled my skin as I stammered, Miss, I think you're in the wrong house?" The old woman's response was an unsettling scream mirroring her earlier outburst. She lunged at me, fists flailing as she rained blows upon my face. "Blood!" she shrieked in her gravelly voice. "I want blood! We want blood!" The relentless assault left me screaming, struggling to break free. Finally, I managed to toss the old woman off me onto the floor. In a desperate bid to escape, I seized the keys for the garage and fled my house, the persistent woman hot on my heels. Now, stranded in the garage, I find myself overwhelmed by uncertainty, unsure of what actions to take or where to seek refuge. Amidst the dimly lit space, my eyes fell upon an old vehicle, tucked away in a corner. The keys were still in the ignition, and the sight of its dusty exterior hinted at years of neglect. With a glance at the license plate, I chuckled nervously. Superbad G. That was my grandpa's old car, all right. Aware of the illegality of driving, I hesitated for a moment. However, the urgency of the situation pressed upon me, and with a deep breath, I turned the key, and the engine grumbled to life. As I eased the unconventional getaway vehicle out of the garage, the old woman emerged from the shadows, closing in on the exit. In a twist of fate, she stumbled and fell just as the vehicle rolled past her. The collision seemed imminent, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. Gripping the wheel, I accelerated, leaving the fallen woman behind. The eerie silence of the town contrasted with the revving engine, created a surreal atmosphere as I navigated the empty streets. The old car, once confined to memories of Grandpa's adventures, now served as my escape pod, and with each passing block, a strange sense of relief washed over me. I was finally away from that woman. I bet she followed me home. She couldn't find me now. I was all the way out here. The next morning when I awoke in the back of the car, it was cold. I could still feel the goosebumps I had from the night before. Whether it was from the cold or my fear of that old woman, I didn't really know. I tried to think about what was going on. Why was that old woman trying to harm me? I realized that I could not go back to my house anymore. It would be unsafe there. That old woman knows where I live now. I kept contemplating what the old woman said. I want blood. We want blood. Who is we? I kind of shrugged it off and tried not to dwell on it. All I could hope was that someone would come into town and find me. I just wish I didn't feel so alone. As I drove, I passed by the movie theater. It was very rundown, and the owners never took care of it. But I noticed something as I passed by, and it made me slow the car down. Written in what I can only assume was blood were the words, "Yearn, yearn, yearn." I had no idea if it was that unsettling old woman who wrote that or what, but I didn't intend on finding out. I drove into the deserted Walmart parking lot. It's funny, normally my parents could never find parking here, but now I had all the parking I could want. I left Grandpa's car and walked inside the store. The store surprisingly was not quiet as I thought. A Taylor Swift song was playing over the loudspeaker. There was an eerie feeling, not being able to hear people speaking to their families, or the noise of kids chasing each other around. I pulled a cart out of the row and continued further into the store. Some of the overhead lights flickered, and they nearly sent me into a panic. But I continued down the aisle, putting canned food in the cart, as well as some fresh foods. I got a small, portable gas stove, some small propane canisters, some small pots, and some big gallon jugs to fill up with water. While walking around the tech aisles, I bumped into a shelf of Xbox games and a bunch of them fell on the floor. The sound echoed throughout the entire store. I sighed and started picking up the games. When I stood back up, A middle-aged man was staring at me a few aisles down. I paused for a moment, not knowing if he was like the old lady from last night. I was right. The man began to charge at me, but I turned and ran in the opposite direction. I ran into the sporting goods aisle, hearing the fast-paced footsteps behind me. I turned to my left and grabbed what was closest. It was a baseball bat. The man was getting closer, only a few feet away from me before he said it. "We want..." I smacked him across the face with the baseball bat, and he immediately collapsed to the floor. I ran quickly back to my cart. I grabbed it when my phone began to ring. Taking it out of my pocket, I saw that Zach, the friend I tried to call earlier, was calling. Answering the call, all I heard was static. "Zach?" I asked. "Psst, psst," came the sound. "Zach?" I shouted. "Psst, psst." About to hang up, I caught a faint, "Psst, Sean," before the call abruptly ended. Trying to call him back proved futile. Leaving the store, I stopped in my tracks when I saw the old woman from the previous night standing next to my grandpa's car. Even from the storefront, I could see the toothless smile on her face. The goosebumps came back, but I knew that I couldn't go back into the store. I started pushing the cart towards my car, closer and closer until I was within feet of the old woman. "We yearn blood! We yearn blood!" she shouted. I pushed the cart into her, knocking her to the ground. I pushed the cart to the other side of the car and quickly tossed everything into the back seat. When I looked up, the old lady started to get to her feet, and the man from the store was now outside, running toward me. I opened the driver's side door and hopped inside, locking it as soon as I sat down. I started the engine. The two of them began banging on the windows of the vehicle. I put the car into drive and drove away. I returned to my house, aware that my dad had possessed a pistol permit for a few years, and he kept a Glock 19 in a lockbox next to his bed. Before stepping out of the car, I retrieved the baseball bat from the back seat. Entering the house, I hurried up the stairs, avoiding any unnecessary lingering. I located the key to the lockbox in my dad's sock drawer and opened it. I took the handgun and 2 boxes of ammo. Without wasting a moment, I sprinted out of the house and back to the car. Feeling a bit more secure with the Glock 19 in hand, I decided to seek refuge in the treehouse that overlooked my house. It was a childhood hideaway that suddenly became a strategic vantage point. Climbing up the rickety ladder, I settled into the small wooden space and, with my back against the wall, surveyed the surroundings. The night crept on, and I managed to get some sleep in the treehouse. The branches creaked in the wind. At the first light of dawn, I cautiously descended from the treehouse. Not a soul in sight, except for the persistent sense that I was being watched. With trepidation, I decided to return to my car, using every bit of caution as I made my way down the deserted streets. As I settled back into the car, my phone buzzed. Surprised, I saw it was a call from Zach. "Hello? Zach?" I cautiously uttered into the phone. Static crackled for a moment before Zach's voice came through, distorted but audible. "Sean, you there? Things have gone insane, man. I've been hiding out. It's not just here. It's everywhere. Meet me at the old gas station just outside town. You know the one." Zach and I met at the old gas station as planned. His eyes reflected the same mix of fear and confusion that lingered in my own. He wasted no time, quickly leading me to the old theater where he had taken refuge with a group of survivors. I had driven past here a couple days ago. If only I had known that this is where Zach had been holed up. I was just relieved not to be on my own anymore. As Zach introduced me to the group, they exchanged wary glances as they welcomed me. Zach explained their strategy to stay hidden, moving discreetly to avoid drawing attention. A girl, named Harper, opened a can of sliced pineapple and handed it to me. I expressed my gratitude and devoured the food, realizing how hungry I truly was. The food supplies from Walmart were gone. I really wasn't going to be able to make this situation out on my own. I needed a group to survive with. With our makeshift group, Zach and I ventured to the local pharmacy in search of supplies. The shelves were mostly emptied, a testament to the struggle for survival that had taken place here. Despite the scarcity, we managed to secure a few essentials, painkillers and bandages. It was a meager bounty, but every bit counted. We decided to slip out through the back to avoid the approaching group of demented individuals led by the old lady and the man from Walmart. The moment I turned the corner into the narrow alley, I saw the grim scene. Blood adorned the walls and ground, Smears, splatters, and pools that spoke of unimaginable horror. There were no bodies, just the evidence that someone, or perhaps many, had met a grisly end in this very space. Okay, new plan. Get the fuck out. So that's what we did. Or tried to. My back burned like someone was watching me, but no matter how many times I whipped my head around to check behind me, I never saw anything. Zach and I decided to see if there was a way out on the other side of town. It made sense for just him and I to go, and if we found an escape route, then we'd come back for the others. We got into my grandpa's car and drove off, heading down Main Street, and right past the demented group, they all shouted, "We yearn blood!" I was so glad I was doing 40 miles per hour right about now. The highway stretched out before us, leading away from the haunted town. As we continued our escape, a scene of destruction abruptly confronted us. A mangled car, reminiscent of a discarded beer can, lay in our path. The metal contorted into horrid angles, bearing witness to a violent collision. I eased the car to a stop, and Zach and I cautiously stepped out onto the road. The ground was scattered with shards of broken glass, emitting a faint crunch beneath our sneakers. We surveyed the wreckage, searching for clues about the cause of the crash. Yet, there was no apparent reason for the devastation that lay before us. Perplexed, I was ready to return to the car when something peculiar caught my eye. A strange shimmering in the air, which seemed to ripple with an unnatural energy. I picked up a rock. So did Zach. We both tested the weight of it in our hand and counted 1, 2, 3. And then we threw them up at the shimmering thing in the sky. The rocks made contact and a bright ripple went through what seemed like a force field wall. I know it sounds stupid, but right now I have no answers. Anything is a possibility, right? I mean, my parents are still missing. My knees gave way, and I crumpled onto the unforgiving tarmac, shards of broken glass biting into my flesh. We were trapped with no way out. Somebody, help us, please? If you like our content, please subscribe, so you can be notified when we upload more videos like this one.